Hi everyone, welcome to today's roundtable discussion. We'll just give a few minutes for people to continue to come in. But thank you for those who have come in on mute. Do feel free to put your cameras on. This is an interactive session. We like to be able to see your faces. So do put your cameras on. Feel free to ask questions as we go. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to continue to come in, find their way to the session. But as we do that, I'm very, very excited to introduce today's speaker interviewee. It's an informal chat, but she's got lots and lots to say. I'm very, very excited for you to hear what she has to say. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's interactive roundtable, which is looking at how consumer beauty and personal care demands are changing. Our fabulous speaker is Lisa Guerrero from Experiment Beauty. Lisa, I'm going to ask you to hand over and take us through who you are, your background, what it is that you're doing with the company to start with.
Yeah, sure. I think my background is like pretty wide. Just to start off, my background is in chemistry. So that's like was primarily my focus for a while in college. But right after college, I started my first company, See Through, which was an ingredient transparency company for beauty and wellness brands. And after 2 years of working on that, I ended up joining a telemedicine company, Apostrophe, which is where I sit as head of brand. And now I start a new chapter, which, just keep going. A new chapter after about a year that I started in COVID, which is Experiment Beauty. It's a Gen Z focused beauty brand that looks at efficacy, sustainability, and really fun aesthetics as all part of the pieces needed to create like the beauty brand of the future. So that is what I do. And I'm a co-founder, and my other co-founder, she's more of the behind the scenes operations and product. She's also a chemist. So we've got two chemists, but I'm the brand, she's the brains, and that's how we usually separate it out. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I'm sure you're doing yourself a disservice there. Having spoken to you, can only imagine you're equally the brains as well.
Yeah, she's product brains. She's the one that does all the super hard research. I'm just like, okay. Into this. But yeah, that's right. A little bit about me. And our first product, by the way, is a reusable sheet mask called Avant-Garde. So we launched a beta back in November, did that for a few months, kind of proved out that this was an item that people were really, really excited about, sold out. And now we are currently raising for our pre-seed. So really excited about that.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's jump into our questions. And I'd just like to remind everyone who's watching, please feel free to come in with questions and comments. This is supposed to be an interactive session. We'd love to hear from you. I'm assuming everyone's quite shy because you've all got your cameras off, but you're very welcome to turn them on if you want to get involved. Please go ahead. You're very welcome to. It's absolutely fine. Hi, Melanie. Hi, Jeff. All right, so we're going to get into some of our questions. So to start with, Lisa, you touched on being a Gen Z focused brand, and we're going to talk a lot about the consumer in this session. Could you maybe give some clarification of when we talk about the consumer, what you mean by that term?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my background is I'm actually in Gen Z. I'm an older Gen Z. But when I think about the consumer, I usually think about the consumer in the future, like what is the next like phase that consumers are going to be really into. And I typically think of the younger consumer because that's where my mind is typically at. But, we could be talking about millennials as well. I think there's a few key trends among like all consumers that you can draw a line through. But I typically talk through to the younger set of consumers. But yeah, I definitely would specify though if I'm talking about millennial versus Gen Z consumers, because there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of key differences in their behavior.
We're going to get into those in a little bit more detail. I tend to do a lot of work in the healthy aging market, and something that we really find when we're talking about the consumer is this tendency to talk about generations. And actually when we dive into who it is we're talking to and who we're talking about, there tends to be certain types of personality or background, or you know, it's not necessarily based on their age, certainly when we're talking about older consumers, but very, very keen to dive in a little bit more about when we're talking about Gen Z. What do you think differentiates that group of consumers when you're talking about, you know, that's who you're targeting? Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah. And also, just to your point, like one of the things that we've been focusing on with Experiment is, you know, I use Gen Z as like a shorthand just so people understand kind of the folks that we're going after, but it's really what we're going after is a certain psychographic. So like, we're not necessarily really looking at demographics that hard. Like, I don't really care if someone's like 18 or 27 or, you know, 41. Like, you know, if they fit a particular psychographic, they're going to have an affinity for our brand. And that's usually how I think about it. It just happens to be that it skews quite young. But we have plenty of folks who are, you know, Gen Y, Gen X, like that use Experiment because they just really identify with the kind of alternative aesthetic that we've built out. So definitely like really keen to talk about psychographics too, because I think that's really important. But just to, what was, can you repeat the second part of your question? Sorry, I kind of just went off on.
Oh, no, that's fine. You answered it beautifully. So let's get into the meat of the bones. And it's very hard to talk about changing consumer trends, obviously, without talking about the pandemic. It's been, I think someone last year said to me, it's shown us the true meaning of disruption, which I thought was a really nice way to put, you know, we hear all this talk about disruptors and, you know, this person's disrupting this industry. Actually, if we're talking about seeing the true meaning of disruption, I think COVID-19 is a really good way of demonstrating that. Now, that said, a lot of these trends that we're going to talk about today were already underway when COVID hit. So can you talk to, if you had to pull out 2 or 3 trends that you think were really accelerated by COVID, could you maybe pull those out? And just a reminder to everyone who's watching and who's joined us, please feel free to ask questions and contribute as we go. You can do that either by using the chat box, or also if you use the hand raise icon, we can move you into our screen and we'll bring you into the conversation as well.
Yeah, so I'd say like some trends that I've seen personally that I think were accelerated by COVID. The first is brands and like the online space as community. That's already been a thing for quite a while, but I see it especially in the younger generation of people truly, I mean, honestly, everybody using the internet truly as a window to socialization, like in a world where we literally cannot see people for the most part. So that actually is a big impact, in my opinion, on how brands market themselves and how brands present themselves to consumers. I've been seeing more brands come out as almost positioning themselves as a platform, as a place to hang out, as a place to be. There's one brand that focuses completely on mental health, and they have their own mental health platform that comes with the product that you purchase, which is fascinating, sad, a little weird. There's a lot going on there, honestly, personally. You know, should brands be friends with consumers like when they're not really people? So there's a whole bunch of like weird social things going on there, but seeing that a lot more, where brands position themselves truly as like, you know, kind of interfacing with people and as a friend of some kind. And then the second one is one that I'm really excited about as well, which is kind of especially in the beauty industry, and this acceleration of like science-backed products. So, you know, we've seen in the past few years the rise of like natural and clean, and like kind of the obsession with like, you know, perceived health threats through our personal care products. And one of the things I actually wrote my own thesis on in college was about clean beauty marketing and how it's damaging to people's perception of like science and their mistrust of like, you know, pharmaceuticals, things like that. So it's really fascinating, but I think COVID for some consumers has really actually accelerated their trust in science, and they're looking for things that have evidence and data behind them. And I think, you know, TikTok and social media has had the rise of like skinfluencers, where a lot of them are talking about, and like dermatologist influencers, where a lot of them are talking about, you know, the science behind products and myth busting. And since there's been so much misinformation about COVID, like I think a lot of people are very sensitive to that and a little more skeptical.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to unpick there. I suppose taking your last point, which is about skepticism and looking for science, it is still an industry where you can perhaps claim science, supported by science, shown by science, and like you say, you can pull a skinfluencer in to say something. How can you see brands and consumers navigating this, as science becomes more important, science backed, health expert backed becomes more important to consumers? How do you see this space starting to evolve?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm already seeing it like on the ground level. Like my first startup was all about marketing that aspect to companies, where it's like you want to be transparent and science backed. Like, and I faced a lot of resistance at first because people just didn't want to tell the consumer too much. But now I think consumers are asking for a lot of things, like especially with SPF. There's been a lot of controversy around SPF testing and SPF's not meeting their marketed label requirements. And a lot of consumers are like, show me the SPF test. Like, how did you do it? They may or may not have the context to understand if that's like, this is a proper test or not. But I think it's interesting that they're asking and that they're expecting companies to have that information and put it out when normally companies would never do that because no one was interested. So I see a lot of companies moving ahead on that, and at the telemedicine brand that I work at, we are like always looking at what other kinds of testing can we put out that would soothe the consumer's concerns around anything. Just having knowledge and like transparency in front of consumers, I think makes them a little less concerned. I always, when I look at experiment, one of the things that we really are focused on is context and explanation with every single decision we make. Like if we use a plastic bottle, why did we choose a plastic bottle over a glass bottle? If we're using this particular ingredient, why did we choose this ingredient over another alternative ingredient? Why are we using synthetics over plant-based alternatives? There's lots of reasons. And most of the time brands historically have not explained those things. And I think I'm seeing a lot more brands shifting towards explanation, education. There's just so much that goes on behind the scenes in product development that consumers just like literally aren't aware of. And the only way to get them to understand your decisions and to accept them and be happy with them and confident in them is if you explain your reasoning. So seeing a lot more brands do that.
And how does that marry them with what we're also seeing with digital world, which is that people's attention span has gone right down, right? So how do you see brands starting to navigate that?
Oh, that's such like, it's really the hardest. That's actually the hardest part is how do you keep their attention? And that's really the thesis behind Experiment is that we're using really cool kind of aesthetics and our science communication literally is fundamentally different by using the same like meme language and like very internet style communication to explain complex concepts about our products. And the only way you can get a consumer to truly understand, besides like, the consumers who are willing to read like paragraphs of stuff, but most consumers are not. So you have to meet them where they are and you have to use language that they are communicating in order for them to understand. This is like science communication 101, where you really want to just get down to where the consumer is and speak to them like a normal human being instead of a scientist or a doctor. Like I think some of the best dermatologists online that have huge followings communicate complex topics in really 15-second TikTok videos. I do it myself. I'm actually a TikToker and a content creator in the skincare space. It is really hard to do that, but it's something that I think historically science has been pretty bad at, and that we have to get better. And I see beauty marketing as like, a really interesting playground for science communication. So
yeah, absolutely. I want to come back to the point you raised at the beginning about this creating communities. And I suppose you mentioned that there were some concerns with that. Can brands be friends with their consumers? Before we get into the concerns, I'm kind of interested in your telehealth experience and what you see, learn from those sorts of communities that are created, how they might be applied to the beauty space, and whether you see a convergence in the future.
Yeah, so I work at a teledermatology company, and back to the kind of trend around science and like looking for science-backed products, like even in our marketing, the stuff that performs the best is all about ingredients and science-backed, and it performs the best with a certain subset of consumers. But I really see like the fact that consumers are looking for science-backed products, the most science-backed thing you could possibly use is like tretinoin and a sunscreen. And tretinoin is prescription only. So the only way you can really get that is if you go see a dermatologist or you use one of these telehealth platforms to get that product. So I see a lot of consumers viewing like teledermatology as skincare. There's the skincarification of prescription products, which I think is really interesting because they're health products. They're stuff you get prescribed, but they're at this like intersection of like, you know, health and skin health and kind of aesthetics, because people want to clear their acne, they want less wrinkles. So I see, you know, teledermatology democratizing that access, and by democratizing that access, you have so many more consumers looking for that thing, because you have influencers now marketing telehealth platforms. I work with those influencers, like, you know, so I think it's really interesting to see teledermatology having a really kind of stronghold, or building a stronghold in the skincare space. And I think you know, there are quite a few examples of popular teledermatology platforms doing that.
Yeah. And then I suppose if we come back to this idea of community, you know, it's not traditionally something that fast moving consuming goods have had to deliver, maybe beyond a bit of marketing.
Yeah.
There's also this increased trend, you know, massive trend, I suppose, in personalization in this space. How do you see those two things starting to intersect in the future?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You know, like a lot of telehealth or teledermatology companies claim like personalization. So that's definitely, they sometimes like straddle line in like personalization space. I think with community and like personalization, you know, I always struggle with like personalized skincare as a chemist. I find it overkill, to be really honest. I find like, you know, very personalized skincare to be pretty overkill. You don't really need to do that. I understand the need and like the consumer pain point of not being able to find products that work for them, but I also don't know if we need like a million different formulations of a moisturizer. Like it's just not something that we really need. And also, you know, it's interesting, like personalization, like I've always found like there are communities around it, but honestly less so. I would say like people build communities around a shared experience of stuff that they really like. I find that personalized skincare to a certain extent doesn't form those same community bonds because we're not talking about the same product. So if I use this Glossier lipstick that I really, really love, and my friend bought it, and she's like, oh my God, it's my favorite lipstick. And then her other friend bought it, and we're like, oh my God, this lipstick is amazing. Or, you know, this face mask that we really like, or this moisturizer. It's a shared experience that we all like the same thing. And that actually is what creates community. It's something we've seen with Experiment. We have our reusable sheet mask. It's this lime green bright color, and everybody is wearing it. So if you're wearing it, you're a part of our community, and it's this visual indicator. So with personalized skincare, I think there's definitely like community that can happen where it's like an interesting, fun experience that they have. But I'd say like, I'm always skeptical of it just because A, I think, you know, it's a little overkill, and B, I feel like consumers might be sharing the experience of using like the platform, but it's not the same as like, in my opinion, it's not the same as like using the same product, because you're not, like, you won't have the same experience. So I'm always a little skeptical about like using like personalization and like combining that with community. Like, I don't know if it always works that way, if that's what you mean.
Yeah. No, that's great. And then if we start to talk about communities, I'm curious at how you get from saying, okay, you know, all these people are using this product and we like it, and maybe we, you know, tag each other online. How do you then get that step forward to having people really feel like they're part of a community? Is that something that the brands can do themselves? Are there partnerships that they can set up with existing communities? How do you see that unfolding in the next couple of years?
Oh my God, brands are getting really advanced in doing that. I think there's a few ways that brands are doing that right now. The first is building it themselves. So like creating and sponsoring like community spaces, you know, subreddits could be devoted.
Do you mean physical spaces?
Like usually digital spaces.
Right, okay.
And especially because of COVID. Got digital spaces, and I see a lot more brands like launching these digital spaces, especially like with Clubhouse. There's a few brands that jumped on to create their own rooms and discuss product, which I thought was fascinating. You know, Instagram lives, TikTok lives, you know, really using the tools that you have online to create spaces where you must have fans that come in and they're your true community. A lot of brands use Facebook groups, specifically Naturium. Their founder is an influencer, so you know there's definitely like a built-in audience there that joins their Facebook group. But I just saw Coco Kind launch Skin Positivity Only, which is you know, really just about posting your skin and talking about it, and like, you know, getting hyped up by your community on like, your skin looks amazing, oh my God, but this is all under the Coco Kind umbrella. So naturally these people are going to be using Coco Kind products, and just kind of reinforces that cycle. So digital spaces are great. The other thing is like, what I, you know, go into experiment with is like a shared like content experience. So like I, you know, one of the ways that we kind of talk about our consumers, they're a part of alt TikTok, which is there's two sides of TikTok. There's straight TikTok and then there's alt TikTok. Straight TikTok is like basic and whatever, and like, you know, kind of pedestrian, you know, internet videos of people dancing and lip singing, whatever. Alt TikTok is where like all the funny memes happen. It's like the Reddit of TikTok. So we really talk about our consumers like they're on alt TikTok. So we have to have jokes. We have to speak in the way that they would speak. And we're curating content for them where they're like just really excited to see when we post and they want to talk to us. And so, you know, that's one of the ways that we kind of build community, is that we're almost like we're in on the joke. And that's really, really important. I don't see a lot of brands doing that really well, but I think there's going to be a lot of brands who are looking to hire, you know, young people or people in the you know, group of consumers they're trying to reach, who's really in the know on how to reach them, because you know, with the new iOS update and you know, Facebook advertising being less targeted, like now is the time where brands really need to build up their more organic marketing and really, you know, leverage community to sell.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about brands then having to become content curators. That's a very big jump from putting products on a shelf. And you know, we're a content creator at the Healthspan Show, and it's hard work. You know, it's hard work to get people watching it. It's a big leap for people. If you had to have one piece of advice, you know, for brands who are maybe looking to implement something like this, what would it be?
Your homework is to just be on social media. Like I think I see all too often there are founders and brand operators that don't feel like they need to be connected to what's happening on social media, and like not be in the know. And I think that's really a mistake, because your instincts on what will work with consumers are just not there. A lot of the decisions we made on Experiment were not based on data or research or like hard numbers. Honestly, a lot of it was based off of intuition from being online, from reading, from spending time online. And yes, it can be a little bit of a time suck for sure if you get lost in the TikTok rabbit hole. But I would say, like, if you like as a brand, there's so many beauty brands, especially launching every single day with little to no differentiation. The way you differentiate yourself is not just through product, there's lots of great product out there. It's really through the conversations you have online with consumers and the content you create and curate. And I think that is like so important. So spend time on social media. Don't see it as like, oh, I have to completely, unplug. Like, it is a part of running your business. So it's just so important to do that. And I see a lot of old school brands kind of struggling with that, is that they're out of touch. And when you're out of touch, you become irrelevant.
I suppose as well, it depends on which consumer you're trying to reach. As you know, and like you say, I can't remember the term that you used, but the profile of person.
They're psychographic.
Psychographic, exactly.
Yeah, and this really, that's really important. Like, know not just your demographic. I honestly like don't care about your demographic. Know their psychographic. Know like where they hang out. If they're hanging out in Facebook groups and like specific, you better be in those Facebook groups. If they're hanging out on TikTok and Instagram, you better be on the pages they're hanging out at. If they're laughing at certain memes, you have to be laughing at the same meme. Not laugh, but you have to be like in it. If they're doing organizing in person, go like or figure out how you can get insight on what's happening there. So there's just so much that's important. And if your consumer doesn't typically exist online, it's definitely harder. But you have to meet them where they are. Like, maybe it's not a text message that you're going to reach them best. Maybe it is like a phone call. Maybe it is a piece of mail. Maybe it's something else. So I don't know. I think brands need to get a lot more creative about how they stand out to consumers, because the beauty, like, we are just absolutely oversaturated with product, and it's so important that you stand out.
We've got a question from Melanie in the group, which is, would you agree that personalized skincare has a higher chance of disappointment to the consumer if it fails to deliver what was promised? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, like, for sure. Especially because it's supposed to be personalized. Like, I think there's one brand that I feel like does it right, and that's Atola. So they have a feedback system that's physical, which I think is really important and different. So they measure like oil content. Like, they have this like little physical kit that comes with your stuff, and you can measure oil content, water content of the skin, and a few other things, and like the pH of your skin. I would say it could be really disappointing if that doesn't work out. But I feel like having a physical kind of component to it that feels like it makes it feel like it's working more. But I would say stuff like, Function of Beauty, their new skincare line, and there's a few other brands like Proven. It's just this quiz that you take, and it's an algorithm kind of picking those things for you. And if it's really not working, I don't think you'd try it again. The thing is, like, what we've noticed is that when a brand like has a product, that's not personalized, it's just the product they put out, and it doesn't work out for someone, what I found is like, cool, yeah, they might be disappointed that it didn't work out for them. And obviously it depends how much it didn't work out for them. Like, if they had a really bad allergic reaction and their skin was scarred, you could probably write them off. They're probably not going to want to deal with you anymore. But a lot of people are more forgiving to that. They're like, cool, wasn't for me. But maybe I'll try something else because I love the branding and I really want to be like a part of this, like, community. I think Glossier is like the best possible example of that, is that they just have an absolute cult following, and a lot of their products don't work out for some folks, but they're willing to go through and try more because they want to be a part of the Glossier community. I am one of those consumers. Their skincare doesn't usually work out for me, but I love their makeup. So yeah.
Okay, great. Well, let's change tack a little bit. So a huge trend that, it's everywhere at the moment, it was pre-COVID, was obviously the demand for sustainability. We had a really interesting conversation this morning about, can beauty be sustainable? How sustainable is it? What changes, just thinking about consumers and the perceptions from consumers, demands from consumers, can you pull out any nuances in how sustainability demands have evolved in the last 12 months?
Oh yeah. I feel like they have evolved a lot. So first of all, like, I think when people think sustainable beauty, they might think of something quite granola or beige or, wrapped in paper. And it's like, something you get, it just,
I've never heard granola describing it.
Yeah, granola is probably the best way to describe it. But it's basically something that feels more down to earth, homemade, natural, right? But I think a lot of consumers, especially younger ones, but millennials too, I mean, pretty much across age ranges, are demanding like products that are better for the environment. I mean, the younger you go, the more intense that demand is. So to me, like, especially going into creating a beauty brand, sustainability is not a selling point to us, it's table stakes. It's literally just like, duh, like, of course you should have that. Just like good product, like the things that you should absolutely have as a brand is good product and a plan for sustainability, whatever that looks like, but working towards being more sustainable. And so what I mean by that though is, working on your packaging and like what that looks like, your formulations, your logistics, your whole supply chain, like vetting those things is something that I think consumers in the next few years are going to be absolutely asking for. What's your carbon footprint for each product, right? Like, I think people are, I'm already seeing brands implement carbon footprint labels onto their products. So this is really just the beginning of consumers really looking for more information, not just on nutrition, not just on, ingredients, but like, where did they come from? How are you creating this product? How much fossil fuels are going into it? What's the waste profile? Like, what's the end of life for this product? So, I think brands are going to need to think a lot more deeply about their supply chain and be a lot more aware. And that's hard. There's tons of challenges around that. But that's going to be a huge demand. Carbon footprint, end of life. So like TerraCycle, obviously a lot of brands are jumping on to TerraCycle because, again, it's a demand for consumers. Like, if I can't throw this in my recycling bin, which honestly, like, is a not so trustworthy place, at least in the United States. It's recycling is an absolute mess here. So even if the product is technically recyclable by putting in your recycling bin, it may not be recycled at the recycling plant anyway. And that's a huge, huge problem. So TerraCycle is becoming kind of an option for a lot of consumers, but I haven't seen data on how many consumers actually
change their habits
and send those bottles back. I have a feeling it's a fraction, but if anyone knows TerraCycle and knows those numbers, let me know.
What about the desire to consume full stop? I know when you and I spoke before, that was definitely something we were seeing. People were a lot more into reusable products. How can you see that playing out in the beauty industry?
Yeah, I think the other thing is really reusable products. I mean, so there's been a focus, especially with COVID, on quality over quantity. Like, I mean, we're spending so much time in our house. Like, we want higher quality items. Like, we want to live with products that we're not just constantly rebuying and throwing out. It feels exhausting just thinking about it at this point. So I think consumers are going to be really into kind of reusable products that are high quality, and they're willing to spend a little bit more on that, so long as they're like confident that this is what they want. So for instance, like our reusable sheet mask, I mean, sheet masks are incredibly wasteful. And I think a lot of consumers are becoming privy to that, just like makeup wipes. There's been a movement away from makeup wipes. I'm seeing a movement away from sheet masks. It's subtle, but it's there. And so we want to step in as the solution, where it's like, you don't need to not sheet mask, you just need to do it in a way that's reusable and more sustainable. And I think that message resonates with a lot of people. And I'm also seeing more refillable beauty coming in, like higher quality compacts, and coming with like tins that you put in once you're done with your powder. So there's a lot of innovation happening there, a lot of like moisturizer pods where you like kind of put it back in the packaging, unseal it, and it's clean. But yeah, so refillable and reusable is going to be like a huge thing. I would say just on the refillable part with liquids, like there's a lot of micro concerns. So like stability issues that brands have to think about. And I haven't seen a brand do it particularly well just yet, but you know, we're working on it. It just takes a lot of stability testing. So there are some hurdles, but yeah, I think a lot of consumers are going to be looking for like higher quality stuff
High
that's
quality,
refillable
fewer
and
things.
reusable. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've got a comment from Martha in the chat just saying from one of our earlier panelists who said consumers are going to have fewer products in their bathroom cabinets, smaller stripped back range of functional and efficacious products. Obviously you agree just from talking with you, but do you think brands will need to refine their product portfolio, you know, thinking not just about emerging brands, but existing brands as well?
Oh my God, yes. I'm so passionate about this. I think one of the biggest problems is overconsumption, like period, end of story. Like we can talk about, you know, refillable and like this and that all day. But the biggest problem is that the beauty industry is just completely oversaturated with product. We don't need another eyeshadow palette. Like we just do not. You know, we don't need another AHA, BHA toner. Like there's tons. So it's like, really, what can you as a brand, like I want people to seriously think back and like, do you want to start a beauty brand? And if so, what are you releasing that's truly going to be different and differentiated? That was actually a big question for me and my co-founder. We're like, do we want to start a beauty brand? Even like asking these really tough questions around just like our place as a producer is our responsibility is to produce things in a way that is ethical. And however we define that, of course, but we really define ethical as like first things first, don't encourage overconsumption. And that's a business decision too, because I mean, our first product is not something we encourage people to repurchase all that much. So reoccurring revenue is not something we're super focused on right now, but there's a few reasons why that's offset by like marketing costs because people take selfies in it, whatever. But you know, when we think about like traditional beauty products, I think there is absolutely going to be a skin minimalism, you know, trend that's, it's not just a trend, it's going to be like quite a long tail thing. Right now, we've just been in a hyper consumption like beauty market. And there's a few people that, you know, I'd say there's a set of consumers that are like really sick of it and overwhelmed. And I think a lot of younger people feel the same, where the internet, social media has pushed them to overconsume to the point of exhaustion. And now they're looking for brands, again, that speak to them in a way that they feel confident in and they're happy in. So I do see brands of the future having a lot more dialed back portfolios and really intentional products that are released slower. And instead of fast skincare and fast beauty, you know, there'll always be, I'd say, fast makeup brands, because makeup is one of those things that it's like, you know, that instant gratification of color. And I hope that changes. But in terms of skincare specifically, I think we need to dial it back from the unicorn masks and really hone in on like, what do consumers want and need and what fulfills a gap in the market. And that's the way it'll stand out.
Yeah, in some ways, you know, there's almost an element of coming full circle, right? I always feel like I need to stand up for the boomers here. We talk about younger people being very focused on climate change, but, you know, I think about my mother raised 4 kids with cloth nappies, and I think, well, you know, she came from a generation that was very much about reusing, recycling. So, you know, in some ways it would be nice to think that we're sort of coming back to that sort of ethos.
Also, just another note on that, a lot of brands I think will also start investing in like R&D. So really reinvesting into formula and thinking hard about, you know, innovative custom packaging that will help, you know, a brand's like product stand out, even if they're not releasing, you know, a ton of product all the time. Like I think a lot of brands just leaned on product releases as a way to sell. And I think that philosophy is changing a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right, let's change tack again. I feel like I could talk with you for hours, but our time is ticking away. And just a reminder, please do feel free to keep putting your questions and comments in the chat. But looking back over the last 12 months, so obviously COVID's been a massive thing, but we've also had some of the political movement, particularly the prominence of the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, again, sort of we're all looking at diversity inclusion as being a sort of need to have business component. But are you seeing any new consumer demands or any nuances in how what people are demanding from beauty and personal care in light of that movement?
I think people are demanding brands that stand for something, especially again younger folks. I think it gets a little dicier as you you know, go up the age bracket. just because like as you get older, it's like it's more and more taboo to talk about politics. But I think brands, especially during the Black Lives Matter movement, brands were called on to do something. Like if you stand for equal rights, if you stand for you know, protecting Black people, like say something. You know, a brand is comprised of people, and yes, it's a corporation, but it is comprised of individuals, and underneath lots of brands, there are plenty of people of color who work for brands and want to feel like their company also represents them and believes that, you know, believes in the things that they believe. So I think like a lot of consumers are just going to be asking brands to be more political. And this has been a conversation that I think a lot of brands have been hesitant around, where especially brands that have been around for a while, is like, how do we like talk about politics? And like they're afraid of, you know, alienizing people. And, you know, that's definitely a business choice for you. But, you know, personally, I think that the brands who are going to have a say in like the cultural kind of fabric, who are going to be a part of consumers' lives, like people want to align in all ways with products they use, and they want to support brands that align with them on sustainability, on politics. So I think we've also gone through just a traumatic past few years as a nation in the United States, and I think again, like people are really traumatized from that, and they don't, you know, they want to again like align with a company that they really can agree with. So brands are going to be asked to be more political, and personally, I don't think human rights is a political issue, but unfortunately it is. So, you know, brands will be asked to speak on that, and I've seen a lot of brands blunder that and do it just as a virtue signal. I think brands that do it right actually need to walk the walk and talk the talk, meaning they need to have it not just on social media as a text post, but they also need to do it in their organization. They need to hire a diverse group of people to help run the brand, because that's the only way you're going to have an authentic message and be able to speak to consumers authentically.
So it's less about putting the black tile on Instagram and more about making sure that you know, the bones of your company have a you know, you're creating an equal and diverse environment within your company, you know, using appropriate marketing images, things like that. It's more about being in the bones of your company rather than, like you say, sort of waving a flag and saying, I support this issue.
Yeah, it's really, because like people can tell. So if like you're releasing a foundation range that doesn't have enough dark shades, like, and it's just all light shades, like, what are you doing? It's 2021. You know, if you feel like, you know, you're going to do a campaign shoot with no with just like all white models, like it's just not, that's not how it's going to work anymore. Like it's just not, it's honestly like it can hurt your business by not investing in diversity. So I just really feel strongly that like it's not just the visual output, it's really, it has to be both. Like you have to both, you know, represent your brand in a way that's like diverse, but you also have to hire people and support people on the backside who's running your brand, so that, you know, you're constantly making decisions on the right path because you have so many diverse voices in the room. So that's really just so important. And people are now, I mean, and again, I think, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement just kind of accelerated that trend, but it really made it urgent. And unfortunately, it took that for brands to step up and do that. But I think, you know, in the next few years, it's not going away. And it's something that brands will be political as well. And, you know, for better or worse, like, I think, you know, especially around human rights issues, that's super important.
Okay. All right, we're coming to the end of our time. I'm going to finish on the big question, which is, where do you think, what's coming next? Where are we going to be a year from now, 2 years from now? You know, a lot of things that we talk about, like the you know, the need for diversity. It's pretty well publicized. Like you say, it's, you know, if someone doesn't hit the brief there, it's very obvious. It's noticed. It's talked about. What do you think people aren't talking about yet? What are our consumers going to want from us in a year from now?
Oh man. I think it's and you know, this is definitely my perspective here, but I think it's brands that you know, go a layer deeper on community and communication. It's brands as content. And I think that is like, that's something that people are doing, but you know, and it's talked about in like very specific circles, but I don't think it's like, no one's got the memo fully yet. Is that like brands are content creators actually first and foremost, especially in a world where we're putting out less product. Well, some brands are committing to putting out less product. You have to be a content creator in order to keep and capture the imagination of your consumers. So I think brands as content creators and as like, I think that is really the next big thing. It's not necessarily like some R&D innovation or something like that. Like I'm not super bullish on like personalized skincare being the future of beauty. It could be maybe in like 10, 20 years, but like, I really don't see that happening in the next 5 to 10 years. So I really see like, you know, brands just evolving to be part of the fabric of our culture, even more so, especially in beauty, even more so. So brands as content through and through. A few great examples is Youth to the People. They have their own podcast now. They have they're doing these like design collaborations with like, you know, organizations completely outside of the realm of beauty. And I think they're doing a really interesting thing and not really releasing a ton of new innovative products, but it's more along the lines of like innovative content. And so that's something that I really care about.
Fantastic. Well, look, Lisa, thanks so much. This 45 minutes is absolutely flown. I feel like I could talk with you for another 2 hours.
Oh, wait, one more thing.
Oh, please.
And waterless personal care, like a new brand called Plus just released a bottleless sheet of body wash that hydrates in the shower. I think that's going to be really cool, you know, especially for cleaners and surfactants. We already see a few brands doing that, but this is the first time I've really seen it done well for body wash.
You call it waterless products.
Yeah, it's like what I don't love using that term just because it makes water seem like it's bad, but it's the idea of like reducing shipping weight. Right. Using the water you have at home and hydrating a product there.
Fantastic.
So in terms of innovation, like in terms of formulation, I think that's a lot of stuff's gonna turn to that.
Oh, I feel like you've just dropped a bombshell on us right at the end.
Definitely, it's an interesting space.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. Look, Lisa, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. If you've got any follow-up questions for Lisa and you don't feel comfortable asking in the group, do follow up with her on the platform. But in the meantime, we will let you get on with your day. We have a great session coming up next, which is exploring changing retailer demands as particularly as beauty and wellness start to converge. So I do urge you to hang around for that. But in the meantime, thank you all. Thanks again, Lisa, and goodbye.